All right, guys, welcome back. This is part 2 of my little IRS swap on my Foxbody. I'm installing the Ridetech IRS suspension on the rear of the car. Last video, I basically tore everything out, the old straight axle, put the IRS cradle and everything in there, but then I got to the point where I just needed brake parts. So I'm going to get into that today, hopefully get to the exhaust too, get all that finished up, and I'd like to hopefully have it all sitting on the ground, wheels on it and everything, and be able to basically see what it looks like with that in there and get the ride height adjusted somewhat close to where it's supposed to be. So I want to get into the brakes right away. And what I have set up here, I basically have the coilover in here just to kind of hold this control arm up a little bit. But I have my two SN95 brackets that I got from Ridetech. You can get these brackets or the S550 brackets, depending on which style brake you want to run. I decided to try these out because most of the SN95 brakes are cheaper and they're also a little bit smaller. So depending on the rims that you're running, the rim size, sometimes you can't go small enough with the S550 to fit your rim. So I went with the SN95 here, and basically there shouldn't be one in the front and back, it's just one per side, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do as far as mounting. If I'm going to put the caliper in front or back, because I'm running actually a parking brake and just a regular caliper. So I figured I'll just mount one on each side. You can kind of flip it around. I think they're made to go on the back side here, because if you look, if you were to mount it in the front here and use an SN95 Cobra style, which that's what these brackets are for, is an SN95 Cobra, not a regular GT apparently, but I think you could probably get them to work. But this is for a Cobra setup, and if you actually see that bolt here comes real close to this tie rod end bracket here, so I don't know if you'd necessarily be able to get a bolt in here and tighten. The head of the bolt might hit back here, but for the most part I think I'm going to be ending up going with custom brackets, which you don't have to buy these brackets, you can make your own, but I just got it mocked up here and didn't know how I was necessarily going to go about doing this, because how do you know what depth you want for your rotor and the size of the rotor and all that stuff? If you're going custom, there's a lot to think about and a lot to measure. So what I did is I figured, well, being these brackets are set up for a Cobra, why not just get a Cobra rotor and kind of start from there? So I did pick up just a standard rotor off the rear, and I'm going to use this. Basically fits on the hub, registers nice, and I'm going to use this basically to kind of try and figure out what, if everything will fit, if my calipers are going to, where I want to position them, front, rear, if I have room on my rim, if the calipers are going to hit the rim for some reason. So I'm going to start with this, and basically then I'm going to be able to order my parts through Wilwood, kind of looking through some of the different brake manufacturers. It seems like Wilwood basically has the most options, so I decided I'm going to go with them. They do make if you look online, I think LMR sells it, I know Wilwood sells it. There is only one rear brake kit that Wilwood sells for the SN95. If you look it up by Cobra, they don't show anything because it's an IRS, but if you go by look up a GT, they sell a kit for back here, and it's basically a single piston caliper that's a parking brake and a regular caliper together combined, but it's pretty small. So I even talked to them about that kit, because I thought, oh good, everything's there and you can just purchase it, but he even said, if you want a little performance out of it, it's probably not the kit to go with. If it's just a standard street driving vehicle, it's probably fine, but being it's only a single piston caliper, it's maybe not what you were looking for. Not that I'm going to be road racing this every weekend, but if I'm going to spend the money, I might as well spend something on a little more performance on it. So I didn't want to go with that kit, but even that kit is not made for this IRS or for the Cobra, so you might have to redo the brackets anyway, but it looked like it would be a decent kit, so fair warning, if you do decide to go with that, it may or may not work. So But so what I decided is I'm just going to have to piece everything together on my own and just do the homework. So hopefully this helps you out if you go this route. But so basically we're going to get started here. Like I said, I got this rotor. This is a slightly smaller rotor than I want to go with. I think this is like 11.5 or 11.6 or something like that size rotor. Decent sized rotor probably would be fine just to run this. I don't necessarily like the looks of the Cobra calipers on here. I want something a little bit more nicer, so that's why I'm going with the Wilwoods. Let me get the wheel and everything mocked up on here, and basically the calipers. And you can kind of tell what I'm going for here, and how I'm going to have to figure out. Basically, there's so many options with the rotors and the hats of the rotor as far as depth and size and all that stuff. I figured this would be the best way to kind of just get a starting point and figure out what I'm going to need and all that stuff. So let me get that kind of mocked up here, and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. All right, so there's my fancy new rims. Went with the Celine style 5-spoke. It's 18 by 9. You can see it's very similar to my Cobra ones up front. So I just wanted to upgrade. I always liked, I guess, that look and the chrome on the car, so I just decided to upgrade a little bit. And that's the one I'm going to go with. Eventually we'll replace the front ones too, but maybe for a year or so we're going to be running this way. So anyway, like I said, I got this mocked up. Everything's kind of loosely hanging here. Basically I just got the cardboard shoved in there just so they stay. But so just trying to figure out, you know, if I want these in the front, in the rear, what position, are they going to fit, are they going to clear, all that stuff. Because I'm not running this style or this rotor on here. I probably could with these Wilwoods. You probably could, let's see, they would be, I think, the right width. Because with the Wilwoods, you have to figure out how thick you want your rotor to be. So the caliper has to match the thickness of the rotor. And I think there's a variation you can have between, you know, this caliper might work on a 12-inch rotor and a 12.5 up to a 13 or so. So there's different size rotors diameter-wise that these calipers will work, but the thickness, you got to figure that out because your brake pads might be different thickness compared to the rotor and the caliper and all that stuff. So all that has to match. So you have to do the homework and figure that out. This would be the parking brake caliper. This is just a mechanical caliper. This one does not have any type of a mechanical way of parking. So I had to get this also. So I'm just going to have to run these separate, which isn't a big deal. It's just you're spending a little bit more money on buying the rear caliper, or the parking brake caliper, sorry. So basically mocking this up, I have all kinds of room here between the rim and the caliper here, probably about an inch. The parking brake one has plenty, but I wanted to make sure before ordering rotors, how much bigger can I go, you know, what depth I can have. Also, I wanted to figure out what, you know, where we can route stuff here. Is it going to work with my brackets that I have? I can use those brackets and build off of them, but they're not going to be a direct bolt in. You can kind of see this one is, let me see if I can get my light mounted here somewhere. So you can all see, let's, hold on. There's no place to put stuff down here. I think that'll work. So, if you look at the bracket, and if I move it down here, where it should be, it's very close on this rotor, somewhat to matching up the bolt holes. The bolt hole distance on this Dynalite caliper here, the bolt distance is like 5 1/4, I think. So these holes are off here. So it won't work. It's going to be a bigger diameter rotor anyway. So I'll have to make my own bracket, but it comes pretty close to almost being a straight shot and just bolting right up. And the other issue is I will have my tie rod end right here. So that's kind of going to be in the way a little bit if I have a brake hose coming off of there. Right now there is room, depending on which way I would go with the rotor. I'm going to gain or you know, lose some room there. So basically, let me get that back up there. They're very close. I mean, it's if anything else, I'll use these brackets as a kind of a template maybe. For sure the bolt holes template, and this hole here I'll need for the template to make my own brackets. Like I said, either I can build off of these or just make one solid bracket, which most likely I'll do. Now, the other thing is, let's see. Do I put the parking brake caliper, you know, where do I position that parking brake caliper? Because I have to have a parking brake cable coming off of it. Right now, this seems to be my best bet because, you know, I'll have to put a different rotor on here, so we'll see. But right now, this cable is somewhat lined up to come straight below the axle here and run straight. And then I can kind of run it right off of that bracket, right along this control arm here, up here to the pivot, and then basically straight forward to the parking brake arm up inside there. So either that, or if I mount it on the other side, up in the front, the cable would probably have to come up over the top here. We'll get a better look at it with the wheel off and all that stuff once I get my rotor, but that's what I'm trying to figure out, and that's why I wanted to just get this rotor and just kind of mock it up to see what I'm working with here and figure out what I'm all going to need. So I wanted to mention the full specs of this rim just in case you guys wanted them. So like I said, this is an 18x9 Saline style wheel. I ended up getting these from American Muscle. LMR sells these too, but they're slightly different. These are a plus 30 millimeter offset, where I think the LMR ones were a 24 offset. So just pay attention to that. Either one I think should fit fine. The one thing I did have to do is I did have to drill the studs slightly bigger. These are made for a 1/2 inch by 18 or whatever it is thread pitch stud, where my hub is a 14 millimeter stud there. So these are slightly bigger. So where a 1/2 inch would be 0.5 of an inch, these measure to about 0.4, I think, something like that in inches versus millimeters. So I basically took a 9/16 drill bit, was the closest thing I had, which is just slightly bigger than a 14 millimeter. So I drilled them out and everything was fine there. Now the center bore fits fine. So plus the lug nuts will actually center the wheel. So even if these are just slightly bigger than what they need to be, they should still fit fine and be centered, and I shouldn't have any issues there. So the center hub fits fine. It's just that you have to drill these a little bit bigger if you're putting it on these 14 millimeter studs. You probably could replace the studs, swap them out with something else, but then anytime you'd have to replace this hub, you'd have to do that, you know, swap all your studs over again. So just a little FYI, I guess there. And but I think they're going to look nice. I would have went with the LMR ones, but they were just back ordered till, I don't know, June or some damn thing. So I just didn't want to wait that long. So I ended up going with these, and I think they'll be fine. Just doing a quick test on there as far as articulating the suspension. Looks like they'll be fine and fit fine. Once you get the rotor and everything on here, it should be spaced out pretty good there. So we'll see how they end up. All right, here's the rotor and hat combination that I decided to go with. It's slightly bigger or slightly different than the Cobra style. This is, I believe, a 11.65 diameter rotor. This is a 12.19 diameter rotor. They are the same, no, a little bit different thickness. This is a little thinner. Like I said, Wilwood has so many options, so it's a little bit daunting to kind of go through everything and figure out what you want to do, especially if you're speccing it out yourself and they don't necessarily sell a kit, but we got to figure it out. kind of what steered me in this direction. I did want to go with a bigger, kind of the biggest I could diameter rotor, but you start running into option problems where if you go with a 12.88 or a 13-inch rotor, something like that, you have less options to fit it to the car. So this is actually a 12.19, which is the same size as some of the ones that I pulled off of there. Those are also 12.19. It is a 0.81 thickness, so the rotor thickness is 0.81. That gives me way more options as far as calipers, rotor hats, all that stuff to be able to fit it to the car. Now, I'm trying to keep it as, cheap as possible. I don't want to spend a gazillion dollars. So if you want to do that or have the money to do that, then you probably have, you can go a different route here. But this is a 7-inch cross pattern here, bolt pattern here. You can get a 7.62, I believe. But there again, you have less options as far as for the rotor and the hat combination. You can get different style material if you're doing a lot more rotor racing. You can get, like a harder rotor material or drilled and slotted and all that stuff. I was just trying to keep it basic. So, but the hat itself is it's a 7-inch cross pattern bolt. So you have to get that to match. It's got the 5 by 4.5 Mustang bolt pattern. This, I believe, is a 2.8-inch hole diameter, which fits the hub. And it is a 0.79 offset. So the offset would be measured from the mounting flange surface here to the top of the rotor here. So basically that thickness. On the old one, this is roughly about an inch offset in here. So I knew I had some room because I had room on the about an inch between the caliper and the wheel. So I knew I had room to kind of bring it towards the wheel more. So that's what this one is going to be, a little bit closer to the wheel, just because this offset is less. But it was a little bit tough to try and find one with this bolt pattern, this hole size, the 7-inch cross pattern, and just all that stuff. So there's a lot of different offsets, but going with this combination here just seemed to work out. And I believe this hat is actually for a 05 to 10 Mustang. So there was a little note in there saying something about a 05 to 10 Mustang. So this must fit that. But so far these holes here, I don't have to drill them out any bigger. They fit over it. But this gets registered here real well on the hub. So that's good. This is just an ultralight 32 vane rotor. Nothing special about it, really. It's probably one of the cheapest ones they had on the site that'll fit this combination. So we'll get this on the car here, kind of get it mocked up, and then we can start figuring out, how we're going to mount those calipers. So trying to figure out where I want to put these. I can mount them somewhat anywhere I want here. It doesn't really matter too much performance-wise, but I need to figure out, ideally, I'd like to have them 180 degrees opposite of each other, just so it's aesthetically pleasing, but it's going to be somewhat close, I think. My determining factor, whether I put, this one in front or in back, is probably going to be by the parking brake one here, just because of the cable. This is a universal cable kit that I got from Wilwood, and you can bend it fairly sharp, but it's got some heftiness to it. So to be able to bend it basically is going to be my issue. But it basically bolts like that to there, and then the cable comes out. I have the cable removed right now. This is actually I believe this is the left-hand side, which would be the driver's side, but it seems to work better in my situation to put it on the passenger side. But just kind of mocking it up, how I'm gonna, have this on here. I do have only so much room to have, where's my light? Only have so much room to make a bracket. I could put this somewhat close to the top. Obviously, this is so bulky in this area that it would hit the upper ball joint there. And then to have it on the bottom, obviously it's going to hit. So I kind of only have this, I suppose 1 to 3 o'clock position on this, on the front, and on the rear. I got a lot more room, I guess, just because I don't have the tie rod in there. But I basically have a, 7 to 11 position I can put on there. Like I said, this is supposed to be what Wilwood calls for the other side, left-hand side, but you can kind of see how this bulkiness here, or the cable, has to somehow fit in here. Now, depending on your offset, this is going to move in or out a little bit. I do have to kind of somewhat make room for the tie rod here. If I put the caliper on here, which is probably going to end up, well, I don't know if it's going to go in here, but I can only go so low too before the bolt hole down here. I wouldn't be able to access it with this in the way. You can kind of get from underneath, I suppose, and turn the wrench or whatever, but the bolt would hit there and not come out. So there's only so much room. Like this would be able to go in here. Same with this. So just trying to mock that up. If I go this route, whoops, pushing parts all over. If I go with this in the front, which just might be the way to go. Come on, get that on there. My cable comes basically just below, or aims right at that castle nut for the tie rod, for the upper ball joint. You can kind of rotate it down towards the bottom a little bit, get a little more room, but then obviously it gets down here by the tie rod. So even to put it right here, I can kind of bend the cable one side or the other of that castle nut. If I go to the inside, I can kind of zip tie it up there so it doesn't move. This isn't going to be steering. Once it's set, it's not moving around like would be in the front. So I would be okay having that up against there. I can go this route. But then I also want to, I got to figure out how I'm going to route this cable to the front with all the suspension moving and everything. And if I do that, my hope is to be able to kind of run this cable up the lower control arm on the front bar on it, and be able to either mount it or zip tie it to there, up towards that pivot point up there, and then run it forward. So I can kind of loop this like that, if you can see that, loop that, and then run it along the front. I think if I tie it up on the top upper ball joint there, it'll clear the drive shaft, and I should be okay. Now, I originally thought maybe putting this in the back would be the best bet, and maybe I'm going to crawl underneath here. If I have it this way, you can kind of see if I can move my light a little better. It's going to come right here, and then that tie rod bracket is kind of right in the way, angled right at it. Like I said, you can kind of bend this cable out of the way. It's more of a direct shot to the parking brake, because then it would just run straight up that upper control arm there, or the lower control arm, sorry. But it seems like it's a little bit, like up here would almost be, I wouldn't have to bend it quite as much, the cable, and I can somehow mount it to this, or tie it to here somehow, and it would clear the drive shaft. So just trying to get all that figured out. Right in that position would be fine, because I could build the bracket off of there. I'm basically going to be building two brackets, off of here, one for the parking brake cable and one for the regular caliper. So, like I said, there's only so much room I can kind of mount these. And I don't know if I want to run this in the back anyway. I'd kind of like to put the main caliper to the back and this one to the front. So at this point, I think I might run this one in the front and then just try and deal with going around that castle nut and making my bracket here. Yeah, and the bracket for this is way further out than it is for the other one. So you can see where the, oops, it's supposed to be that way. You can see where this mounts here in these bolt holes. They do make one with a deeper bracket. The mounting bolt holes come down further. I wasn't sure which one I was going to get there. I guess this one will work just as fine. I could always make some myself there too. But I think that's what I'm going to run with here is mount those brackets there, or mount this here and just deal with this and loop it down around. I have plenty of cable. And then that gives me a little bit more room too. Like I said, I prefer almost to have this caliper in the back just because where I can run my brake line, my flexible brake line, to come straight to the caliper if it was in the front right here is a little trickier to have slack in it and coiled and be able to go up and down just because it's so close. To have some sort of loop in there where it works, or if it's in the back here, I can go straight back along the frame and then kind of tuck in. There's plenty of give to that whole line where it'll flex up and down with the suspension. Not that the suspension is going to be moving a whole lot, but there's going to be, you know, a few inches of play there. So to mount it back here, I think would be better or easier to run that line. So chances are I'm going to run this one back here and then run the parking brake up here. So now it's just a matter of kind of getting my brackets made and get all that figured out. And doing some pre-mock-up here, what I did is they have, let me grab them here, these couple of spacers. I think these are 1/4 inch spacers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they're the same width as the bracket. But you're supposed to, with this bracket, they come with these 2 1/4 inch spacers that go between the hub and the bracket, so it spaces the bracket out. Well, if I get rid of those spacers, just bolted this plate directly to the hub, and then I get this caliper. Now I'll be doing this either in the rear or the back, but if I do that, these spacers are almost the exact same gap between there now. So I'm basically just putting these in a different spot. So I can make a flat plate, basically use these spacers between there and the caliper, and that's going to be my spacing. If I need, they do send some extra shims with these to get this perfectly centered in the caliper, the rotor. So if I need to do any spacing, I can either put them, you know, with these spacers here or behind this plate here and space it out this way. So either way I can kind of get that spacing with those fine shims and get that figured out. So I'm glad that's going to be somewhat easy for that. But that, I think I'm going to mount that on the back side, this main caliper, and then put the parking brake up here. All right, so I got the rear caliper basically mounted to the rotor here. I want to, you know, make my bracket, but I don't want this to move at all. So right now I kind of have some cardboard shoved in between the brake pad and the rotor just to keep it tight. I also have a couple pieces of plastic that I taped just on the inside edge here on the top and the bottom. So when I push the caliper on, it bottoms out, and that's going to leave me my clearance. I'm also using, kind of going off of that, if you want the brake pads in here to be at the very top edge of the rotor, so they're more or less flush with the outside diameter or edge of the rotor. Plus, if you go too far in, it will just bottom out here. You don't want that to rub, obviously, on that inside edge here on the caliper. So I got that just so it's always in the same spot. Kind of have it zip tied on here just so it doesn't fall off on me when I'm working with it. But that should be the spot that I need it. And when you look on the inside here, you can see it's not, this is rotated a little bit, but it's not terribly far off from those SN95 brackets. I don't know how much different the S550 brackets would be from Ridetech, but I'm guessing they'd be a little bit bigger. Now, I don't have my spacers in right now behind these bolts, so it's just flush up against the hub or the spindle. So there's basically about a 1/4 of an inch. If I actually take this spacer here, it's just a little bit of play, so a washer or two. Plus I have this kind of wedged to one side because of that cardboard in there, so it would actually move that way just a little bit if I centered it. And because this is a fixed caliper, it does not float, so you have to have this centered on the rotor when you final install it. So that's the importance of that. Versus a normal pedestrian car or passenger car, this is going to be a floating caliper, so it's going to center itself. Actually, this parking brake caliper is a floating caliper. It just slides on those 2 pins and centers itself. So that one I don't have to get dead center. But anyway, as you can see, it's pretty close. It just needs to be extended out a little bit further, that bracket, and it should be good to go. Now, I thought it would be a little bit tricky just to try and figure out, measure that perfectly so all my holes are perfect and I don't have to, have it made a bunch of different times. But so I actually am using parts off my old setup. So this was one of the brackets off the old brake assemblies that I might use on the Ranger. This has the bolt pattern of that 5 1/4, I believe it is, for the caliper. So I was kind of actually trying to see if this would fit on here or not. And somehow I could just bolt that to there, or, and buy another bracket the same, but not quite. It just quite doesn't fit. The center of this actually would hit the hub on the inside. So even if I was able to bolt that on like that, it would still hit right here and be too thin, kind of in the center to just bolt right up. It's hard to see, but the hub inside here, or the spindle, sticks out and it would hit. So I'll make this one bracket, but I am using this as a pattern. So what I did is I took this and then just traced out a pattern on some ram board or some cardboard. Just took the part that I needed, cut out for that one boss that's in there, as you'll see. Marked my holes, got some bolts there. Basically, just going to stick this in the caliper bolts, or in bolt holes like that. So that should be centered. And then what I'll do is I'll tape it to the other bracket here. I'll get it so it doesn't move. And then I'll kind of finalize some of these edges and stuff. I might fill in this opening here a little bit because I have some extra room in here. I don't know if I necessarily have to, but I might just give a little more material there. But you can kind of see I have a couple lines drawn where I'm going to just transition that into the other bracket, or I can kind of run straight. I can add more to it if I want. But I'll get this taped on here, and then that should be my pattern for a new bracket. And I should be able to trace that out on some more ram board and make one solid pattern, and then double check it here. And if everything lines up the way I want it to, I can send that off and have that made. I'll probably have that laser cut by a local metal shop. I don't know if I want to, this is 1/4 inch. I think that would be heavy enough. I don't think I would have to go to 3/8. Something like this bracket here off the old one, this is 3/8 thick, but this is aluminum, so they probably went a little bit thicker. And also this bracket here is actually made to go on the back side of this caliper and then bolted all the way through. The holes in the caliper are not threaded. It's just an open hole. So these are actually supposed to go through, the bolts are supposed to go through to the back side of this. I don't want to do that just because it gets so close to the rotor. which that's the way the other one was on this setup, and it was okay. I would, if I did do that and ran a bracket like this on the inside, I would just have to run some big spacers between this outer and inner bracket. But I thought, why do all that extra stuff on there when I probably can just tap these? Just put some threads in here, and then I'll just run my bracket out, run the bolts right into the threads on here, and then just Loctite everything, and I should be good to go. And that should be solid. So we'll get that tape pulled out. We'll pull this bracket back off. We'll mark a new one, make a new template, double check it, and then I should be able to start working on the parking brake bracket. All right, I got both my patterns made now for my brackets. I'll just have to have those cut out. This will be for the main rear caliper, braking caliper, and this is the parking brake caliper. You can see this one is quite a ways out or bigger. And I guess if you went with the larger mounting bracket for this parking brake one, you wouldn't have to make this bracket as much, but actually this one, if I open it up, kind of stick it in there. So that'll be about like that, and you can see it comes way out there. So, but what I did is I kind of did a similar thing with the rear one. I used these little spacers, and I put them on these pins here in between the brake pads like that, and that was my spacing up against the rotor. And same thing there is you want these brake pads, the top of the brake pads, when you look inside there where the material is, and you want the top of that pad right on the top edge of the rotor here, so the pad is basically right here. So that's why I got my spacing there. And it actually turns out that these spacers might be perfect for me. They're about 7/8 of an inch long, and that's basically going to be my spacing that I'm going to need to go off there. So I might just reuse these for my spacing off of there. And so that'll basically fit like that on there. So that'll be, I think that's going to work perfect. And I think I got all my bolt holes and stuff. Now I can just, now to see if the metal shop can make those exact patterns for me, and get those out of probably 1/4 inch material, and just 2 of each. They should fit on both, you know, depending on, they'll fit on either side basically. And I can get those mounted. I can get the cable then mounted to this. I think that's going to work fine. I kind of started figuring out how I'm going to route that and where I'm going to tie it to and stuff. I think that'll work out. It's going to be a little bit of a pain to go above the drive shaft and get it attached to the factory handle, parking brake handle, but we'll get those made, get everything on here. I'm going to take this rotor back off, get all the screws put in here. They do have the bolts that come with the kit. You have to get a separate bolt kit for it. It's separate from the hat and the rotor, so you have to order 3 different parts there to assemble everything. But they do have, you can wire the bolts together so they don't come loose. I don't want to do that because it's a pain in the ass. The last kit that was on here, I just used red Loctite, and that seemed to hold up fine. So that's what I'm going to do with those bolts. We'll get the rotors all assembled and torqued up, and then yeah, hopefully we'll get those made here next day or two, and get all that stuff mounted, and then I can kind of start running my lines and probably figure out what I'm going to do with the parking brake cables. One thing I didn't think about that I'll just mention here too is that when I was kind of mocking this up here, let me throw this on quick. One thing I didn't quite think about is that being this thing is so kind of bulky in the back here for the cable, depending on your rotor offset, you may have to watch the clearance on this part of the car here, the body. You may have, I have room here. I kind of took the shock out there, or the coil out, and I articulated the suspension just to make sure it clears, but I have roughly 1 inch or so between the body and the back of the parking brake caliper there. But you may need to take this spring perch out of here, take all that out, cut this out, or bend it, fold it over, depending on what your back spacing would be there, your offset of your rotor. So because that's just kind of so bulky like that, but I think I have roughly about that much gap or so between there. So just something to think about when you're trying to figure all this out. All right, got my caliper brackets back from the metal shop. I think they turned out great. They did a good job of getting them just exactly the way my template was. They were able just to scan the template and then cut them out for me. The only thing I didn't like about them is you can kind of tell right where the laser or the plasma cutter starts. It would have been nice if they would have started in the center and kind of worked their way to the outside. But either way, I think they turned out great. A couple of these I did have to enlarge the holes. For some reason I thought they were 5/16 and they needed to be 3/8. So I did kind of drill them out, but I tested them before painting these things, made sure everything fit and it was exactly where I needed them, and they all worked out great. So now I just put a little ceramic paint on there, actually this dupe color stuff for calipers, brake calipers. Kind of been using that for just all around paint for painting things. It's got a good finish, it seems to be real durable, but anyway, got that on there, they're looking great. So we're going to get those bolted up on both sides and we'll take a look, and then we could probably start getting that parking brake cables hooked up and all that stuff. So we'll get into that next. So both calipers are mounted now. They worked out pretty good. This side, the parking brake side, I have these little spacers in here that I just happened to have. They were basically a 7/8 spacer. I did mill or machine them down to 0.8 instead of 0.875. I should have probably left them where they were or not milled them so much, maybe a 0.85 or something. Just because this gap here between the aluminum here and this steel bracket, they were tight together. And because they were tight, that meant this side of the caliper was kind of moved over this way. So you could spin the rotor freely, but you could tell it was just dragging just a hair. And it didn't have room to move this way any, so it could only go this way, which would have been fine if once it got wore in, but I just wanted that little bit of floating there, or room to float, so I moved it over and just kind of put a small washer on each one here and here. But otherwise, I think that should be fine. This caliper will most likely move this way as it wears in, but being a parking brake, it's not going to get I would imagine a whole lot of wear on it. Those pads will last a long time. But this one should be mounted, ready to go. You know, got to mount up the parking brake cable there. On this side, worked out good. All I needed really was these 1/4-inch spacers that came with the original brackets from Ridetech that I bought. Once I got it mounted up here, it was just slightly off, so I had to put one little shim on top and bottom here to get this centered. Being it's a fixed caliper, you want it centered, so I got my gaps almost perfect there between the rotor and the pads. But I don't remember if this was with the Wilwood calipers or on the Ridetech. And this might have been the Ridetech, but they sent along basically these spacers with that, with these brackets that I had bought. And these are like, half of them are really thin, they're like a 0.15 or 1/6. Where these other ones are a 0.3, so they're basically twice the thickness as these are. So be aware of that, just so you don't get them mixed up, and a thin one up here and a thicker one down there, and the thing's sitting a little crooked. But so once I got them in there, then it's centered perfect. So that's looking good. I did tap these calipers. Typically, Wilwood just has a bolt through or a through bolt. A lot of times what they do is their bracket comes on the inside here, and then they'll have a steel insert in their aluminum bracket. Then it mounts to the hub somehow, or the spindle somehow, and then the bolt will just go through. But I don't like necessarily the brackets being this close to the rotor or coming through there. So I just tapped this. I used the bolts that came with the original Ridetech brackets. They're I think a 12 millimeter, and just tap that to that size. They're a good beefy bolt. I am a little worried, you know, like 1% worried that I might have issues with the aluminum, maybe being too soft to be mounting it. Maybe that's why Wilwood always has it through bolted like that into a steel insert into aluminum bracket. But I think I'll be okay. I put some blue Loctite on these bolts. Hopefully they don't come loose, but I'll keep an eye on that. Worst case scenario is I can always put a nut on this side, just tighten everything down, or build my bracket different if I have to. but I think it'll be okay, and we'll just, like I said, keep an eye on that, and can always do something different there in the future. But so far I think that's going to work. Like I said, get that brake cable, parking brake cable put on. I can tighten up the axle nut now that I have both my brackets on, because you need that little bit of play there. I can get my brake line run here and keep moving on with this project. All right, things are finally starting to take shape here, boys and girls. I got basically both sides pretty much bolted up, put together. You can see this side here. Got both calipers mounted. I got my brake cable kind of mounted in here. That's not finished up just yet, but I got it mocked up the way I wanted it. I got my coilovers put in. Right now I just have the coilovers, just the top bolt tightened down. The bottom one I still want to be able to remove, and so I can move the suspension up and down. I'll probably have to do that for the exhaust, just to make sure that all clears. I got my tie rods put in. Those will have to be adjusted. I'm waiting for my brake lines. I had tried some 24-inch pre-made brake lines here and tried a couple different ways of how I want to route them, and it was a little bit too long, so I ordered some 20-inch ones. But basically it's going to be a 90 off of here, and then kind of follow the curve of the frame rail here, and then it's going to shoot down to the caliper, and then basically I'm going to have a 45 fitting pointing up, and then that line will be a straight line into that, and I think that'll be good. It should clear everything. I kind of ran it, mocked up the suspension, or moved the suspension up and down just to see if it would clear, and it just goes over the top of the upper control arm here and stays there basically, and it doesn't, like the 24 would hit up here. Once you would compress the suspension all the way up, it would kind of wrap up too tight along here. So 20-inch should be perfect. Then I can get that stuff bled. I'll show you underneath here what I got done too. How I got that parking brake cable routed for the most part. Word of advice too, the top bolt here for the coilover, getting on that nut is a total pain in the ass. You have to pretty much use a open end wrench to get in there, but it's the body of the coilover gets in the way. It's kind of so close to the nut. The only true way to get on there decent would be to come from the top. Well, that ain't gonna happen. Otherwise the body gets in the way to get up in through here with the wrench. You can't get on this side, you can't get an open end or a boxed end wrench on there. It's just, there's no room. I could barely get my open end wrench up in there. Now I have my fuel filter up in here, which somewhat gets in the way, but it is still tough to get up in there. Even if that was out of the way, I still can't get the wrench between the nut and the body of the coilover here. You have to kind of come from the top angle down on it. So if they would have made the nut, it's a pretty thin nut. If they would have made it a normal sized or taller or thicker, however you want to call it, it would give you more room out here to be able to get on it. So if nothing else, maybe try and switch to a different nut on there if you can't get on there. The only thing is the bolt only sticks through so far. So if you went with a longer Teflon nut, the Teflon part wouldn't even reach the end of the threads probably. So that's probably why they went with a thinner one like that. Either that or cut this plate out of here, this part of the body out of the way, but you'd have to probably pull the tank down for that. But anyway, you can kind of see how I got the cable routed here up over the top of the axle, and then I basically zip tied it to the bottom of the control arm, and then I have it routed here somewhat basically on the front side of it here, because if you put it on top here, then it could get crushed between this part of the cradle and the lower control arm if it ever gets collapsed enough or the suspension gets pushed down enough. And then I have it running through that hole on the cradle and then up towards the front. The other side is very similar. I got that zip tied there and then up through there, up through that hole. I'm trying to get through all right. And then basically I was going to put a clamp on each one of these brackets for the brake cable, but the floor is not symmetrical, so it's the tunnel is towards the passenger side, so there's way more room over here than there is on this side. So I didn't end up using it. Otherwise, it would be such of a awkward kind of kink in the line there. So I just decided to leave that one loose. But then on this way, I was gonna run through these little brackets. These are used for the original parking brake cables from the factory. They have kind of a little football-shaped piece of plastic in there that pivots. So when you apply the brakes, it kind of pivots, because then the parking brake cable goes out through here and out the other side of the lower control arm down here. If you have your stock ones, they still might work for you. I don't know how, if they come out here somewhere, if you'd be able to run them over, or if you'd be able to take them loose and kind of run them on the inside. They might still work for you, but this is a Wilwood kit, so I just decided to get these to work. But what I was going to do though is I was going to run them through the center of here. It'd be just a nice place to run them through there and hold the cables. But if I put them through there, they got too close to the drive shaft. So that drive shaft sits up in here pretty tight. So you want to make sure that these cables are all the way up as far as you can go, and just hug that tunnel as much as you can. But even the bracket here, if you have this bracket further back, this back here sits lower than it does up here. It starts to ramp up towards the front. So back here, if I put that bracket, that might hit the drive shaft. So I put it up as somewhat far as I could. I didn't use the bracket that came with it, and pretty much everything that Wilwood sent from here forward, as far as brackets and clamps and all that stuff for the cables and adjustment, I'm not using any of that. What I did is I went and kind of mimicked their bracket, but I made it wider, and just made my own, and then just drilled it. So I got them in there. Let me get to the other side here. Like I said, the cable housing is finalized. I got that mounted, but the cables themselves are just kind of loosely in here for now. We'll get to the inside here, but I have that taken out, the handle, because that has to be modified. But basically you can see my little bracket here. And then I just have everything measured out. But I think those will work good. I shouldn't have any issues with the cables binding or anything. What I wanted to do was make sure that cable housing came to the pivot point here for the lower control arm. That way there's not going to be a lot of movement of that cable here, because it's so close to the pivot point. You know, if you have it way out here, it's going to move up and down quite a bit. But here, there's barely any movement. So running through this hole isn't going to hurt anything. And then just have a little bit of play here so it can flex. But I don't know if I showed this. I made a little bracket here for my mufflers. That's going to be where I'll have my muffler hangers eventually. I kind of did some mocking up off camera about that the other day. And I just kind of put a little brace across here, and then the hanger is going to go on each side here. But I'll show you more of that once I get to the exhaust. But I'm going to show you what I got on the inside here. Like I said, you have to modify the parking brake handle. So I have it all apart. I have the parking brake handle taken out here. It's somewhat easy to get that armrest out of the way, and then get the 4 screws that hold this part of the console in here, and then take this out. And LMR.com kind of has a good video about this, how you have to modify these. But basically, the lever here, here's the cable that sticks out of there, so that gets hooked into that hole there, like so, gets wrapped around, and then it sticks through the floor right about here somewhere. The one thing I was looking at is this was barely sticking through the bottom of the floor, so to get it further out of the floor, you pretty much have to put tension on here. And this was the coil spring that's in there. So that was all wrapped around kind of in this area here, and it would hook here, and then it's kind of latched in there. But that's what would put tension on your parking brake cables for the drum brakes. Well, you had to pull that out quite a bit before, that would, the best way to describe this, I guess, the way it was, if I was to hook up the parking brake cables for the disc brakes, I couldn't put tension on any of the spring here, otherwise it would apply the brakes in the back. Well, if I just left it loose so it wouldn't have tension on it, this would bottom out like that and not even turn this, because the spring was so, you had to wind the spring up so much. So I think with the parking brakes on the drum brakes, there had to be tension on it or something. I don't remember. That's been so long ago that I had parking brakes on that car or ever used them. But this coil spring had to bind up so much before it would actually pull that cable in through the floor that it just wasn't going to work. So what you're supposed to do is cut that spring out. LMR.com talks about just kind of cutting half of it out, but I went and cut all of it out. It's hard to maybe get in here, but to actually cut out of here, because it's wrapped around 3 or 4 times, this stuff actually bends fairly easy. So I just cut a couple loops out of it and then just started bending and cutting and getting that all out of there, because I figured if I left any of it in there, eventually it would rattle and just drive me nuts. So I got it all out of there. This is actually, this hole typically sits back here, but once you get that spring cut out of there, you're supposed to kind of wrap it around and get this latch here engaged on a tooth or two. And typically it's, let me see if I can move this here. Typically, like I said, it sits probably about like that with the drum brakes from the factory. So this thing isn't actually doing anything. And then there's a little tab that actually wraps over the top here that you cut off. So this is cut off on the top here. And if you don't cut that off, this thing likes to move up a little bit. So in the car, it's always sticking up a little bit. For me, that would drive me nuts. But so the way it sits right now, these teeth do nothing down here anyway. So once you get all that stuff cut off, you can wrap it around this way, I guess. Now it actually engages with it. So right about there is where they tell you to basically, you're going to tack weld this together. So then when you actually move the arm, the whole thing pivots. So there's no play there, there's no spring or anything. And then it'll actually sit flat. So I'm going to wait, because I'm actually going to order, LMR has a new, they call it a upper or a front brake cable, I think, parking brake cable, front or upper, they call it. It's just this short little piece here, but I need a new seal here. This seal is kind of wore out, shot. But what it is, it's kind of the same cable, but then there's a long threaded rod that sticks out or is attached to it for adjustment. So I can cut this. I can reuse this if I want. The kit actually comes with a new one of these, and it also comes with a little bit narrower one. So you can use either one, I guess. But I'm waiting for that to show up, and then I'm going to wait to see how much cable actually sticks out the floor before I go and tack this. Maybe I want to adjust this just a little bit one way or the other, so I have more or less cable sticking out. But so once that shows up, I can get that in there, and then I can finalize the rest of that cable or parking brake cable and actually try that. Forgot to mention too, I did throw the sway bar up in here. I don't have the end links on. I'm going to leave them off for now. Those will be easy enough to throw on later, but like I said, I still want to be able to articulate the suspension for the exhaust and stuff. But I did throw them in here, or the sway bar in here. The top bolts are pretty tight to get at. This is an Allen head cap screw in here. The bottom one's fine, but you just got to take a regular old Allen wrench and get it up in here. You kind of come from the side here. The tank is just in the way. To use a socket Allen isn't going to work. Maybe on the bottom one, but the top, there's just no room. This side is a little bit tighter, but I was able to get in there. You can get to the nuts, no problem, from the back side. So as long as you can hold this with an Allen wrench, you're okay. And then tighten them up from the back side. But that's in. That's looking good. So, all right, so that kit came in from LMR. You can see I got the cable on. I was kind of waiting to tack weld this lever on here just because I didn't know exactly where I wanted to position this, but I think this should be okay. I did cut a little bit of this off already because it's just very long, but basically comes with that cable and then these two pieces here, the seal, and then a couple of jam nuts for the threaded part of it. What I plan on doing is, once I put this in there, I still have to have a way of somehow attaching the cables to this piece here. And I wasn't sure how I was going to do that because once I'm under there, I need some sort of an adjustment on the cables, or I want a way of adjusting it. So what I came up with is I found these Dorman cable stops. So basically, a cable goes through this hole here, and then you just tighten this down. The little ball bearing goes in between there and kind of squishes it in on the cable. And so I'm not going to use the two new ones here. I suppose I could, but I'm going to take the old one. So I cut the old one off of the cable, and I basically drilled the hole bigger here. And what I plan on doing is I'm going to take this cable stop, and I'm going to set it in there just like that. So I'm going to have to notch the ends open there, and then I'm actually going to weld this in place on the end there, and I'm just going to line it up so basically the cable comes through that slot, and then the jam nut here, the jam bolt, basically go in like that. And I should have room underneath the car for all this stuff, but that way I can basically adjust the cables however I want. There's going to be adjustment here on the stud here, or the rod, and then there is a little bit of adjustment on the cables themselves as far as the sheathing part, or the housing of the cable. So I can adjust it there too, but I wanted the adjustment to be here. I could crimp an end on there, but it would be so difficult to make sure that both of them are perfect. I know there would be, this kind of takes up the slack on both ends, but I just wanted to be able to adjust it, and I thought this would be the best way. So I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about under the car. So this is how the setup should look when I'm done. Once I get those cable stops welded in on this piece, then I'll have the fine adjustment that I want on each one. You'll have the adjustment on the rod itself too. This is probably where most of the play will be. Just so when I pull on it, the jam nuts will probably be out here somewhere. So I'll have a little bit of room to pull the handle up before it actually contacts that, because I don't want necessarily tension on the cables to drag, when I'm going down the road. So there's got to be some play in it where they're fully released. You also have the adjustment here on the cable housings, so I can back those out and more or less make the cable shorter just by adjusting that. But I think that'll work. We'll get all those pieces welded in there and get that together. Then I can get the drive shaft in and start getting the exhaust on, and we're getting pretty close to the end here. All right, handle's mounted in here. You can see that's fully tight. She's locked up there. Everything is working good there. Now I can spin it. Show you underneath here. There you go. That's working out great down here. Got my jam nuts adjusted right. And I left a little bit of cable on there just in case, but hopefully that's not going to catch on here. I put happened to find a couple small little caps there just to cover up the end of the cable there, but I did not use the little check balls that were in here for those cable stops, just because they make the bolts stick out just a little bit further than I wanted them to. This side here is a little close to the tunnel, but so far it's not rubbing on anything, so should be good there. But now I can throw that drive shaft back in, and that should be all done and working. But yeah, get the drive shaft in there, get that finished up, and then I should be able to get the exhaust on. And I think that's about most of the major stuff there, so we'll keep moving on here and finish this thing up. All right, I want to try and save a little bit of money with my mufflers here. The way that currently was in the car previously, we had the inlet on that side, outlet on this side, which isn't going to work for the IRS now. They have to be both on the same side for the exhaust to clear underneath. So instead of just buying a brand new one from Flowmaster and having it on the same side, there's nothing wrong with this one. So I just cut the end off, flip it like that, I'll re-weld it back on, and it should be fine. There's basically nothing on the inside here that's going to hurt if I flip it like that. So do that, put a little paint on it, do the other muffler, and then I should be good to go, and hopefully everything clears here, and we'll get the rest of the exhaust done. So I figured I'd start putzing with the exhaust here. This is the original tailpipe that was on the car. My thoughts were that I could take this and kind of use as much as I can for the exhaust. I may still cut it off right here and just use the chrome tailpipe. This is aluminized tubing. It's still in good shape, but I just wanted to see if maybe I could reuse as much of this as I can. My thought was, you know, if I can cut it right here and just kind of spin this, because the way this goes in here, if we can see it, it kind of hangs like that. The exhaust used to go up over the axle. Well, now it has to go basically straight across where the tank is, right behind the cradle, and then go forward. So I thought, well, if I can cut it right here and just spin it and point it forward, or point it towards the center, then maybe I can, you know, it's just one cut, re-weld that back together, and got enough tubing to get at least to the center or something like that, or close. So I'll kind of show you. I got the other side. It's somewhat mocked up. This side, I forgot that this piece of the tank hangs down like this corner. I don't know why they bent it like this, or why they couldn't, you know, it'd be nice to cut that off right there or something, but obviously I'm not going to cut a fuel tank and have sparks going all over. Plus it's sealed down here, so I might have to bend this a little bit to get that out of the way, because it's got a cut under it. It might be low enough where it's down here anyway, so it might clear it, but I might have to do something with that, or I don't know if I can try and bend it up instead, but you know, before it kind of went under and over, so. But I'll, here's the other side that I already kind of mocked up a little bit. So I tried making, so it should be about something like that, I think. I tried making the one cut here, and it wasn't quite the right angle, so I cut it again here. So now there's 3 pieces here, but it did come out somewhat decent. I'm gonna have to get the center pipes underneath the diff first and come out with those 90s behind the cradle and point them this way, point them out towards the outside before I can kind of finalize this. But I might be able to use a bunch of this at least to get somewhat close to the cradle there, to the center, and that way I don't have to buy as much tubing. I don't think I'm going to need that much. I was going to get some stainless. I might still end up bringing stainless all the way out to the tip out here, just because, but I mean, like I said, this aluminized is in good shape. I think I only need just a couple straights of piping, and because it's the mufflers take up a bunch of the tubing, and it's just a matter from getting from the front of the cradle to the back here, and then into the tailpipes. So I don't need a whole lot of new tubing. I suppose I could just go aluminized and save a little bit of money, but I'm probably going to go stainless underneath there. But I thought that turned out okay. Everything kind of matched up here. I just had to kind of twist and turn them just the right way to get the right angle. This still might have to move a little bit, but I might have to somehow come straight back from the mufflers and then try and meet up with the tailpipes, and then try and get the tailpipes to line up straight and everything. So I have a little piece of foam in here just to kind of get the gap right that I want between that and the bumper, and then I'll have to try and line it up a little bit. I'd like to get the tip pretty close to the end of the bumper here. If it sticks out a little bit, that's fine. I know I stuck out a little bit last time. So even to get the Flowmaster name just sticking out a little bit, but I'd like to get that somewhat tucked in there. So we'll see how it pans out here. I'm going to get this side cut. All right, I was able to finish up the passenger side tailpipe here. I did reuse some of the old pipe there. You know, I cut it in kind of 3 chunks there and spun it so it worked. And then I finished up with the stainless. I'll crawl under there in a second here. And it worked out okay. I'm probably going to end up painting this black, just kind of hide it under here. And I'll probably end up wrapping it. I guess I wouldn't have to necessarily paint it if I'm going to wrap it, but either way I think I'm going to do that. But put some header wrap on it and just kind of protect the tank a little bit from heat, and also some of the suspension parts and the diff under there. So, but I did get my brake lines in here, my flexible brake lines. So I got those installed. I got just a 45 there, and that's a 20-inch line, and then a 90 on the other end there. But I got everything bled. I don't have any leaks or anything, so that's awesome. Tailpipe, I tried to get it centered between the tank here and the side of the body. That turned out okay. I wasn't sure what kind of angle I was going to have here, but it's pretty flat. I did have, I don't know if I showed this earlier, but I just have this little metal piece here. That's just my little straight edge, I guess, just to try and get these both the same, so they're both at the same height. I might try and push this up a little higher when I finally install them, but I was trying to, the diff, kind of hangs down just a little bit in the center, so I was trying to keep each one centered here and centered here, and also I want to be able to drain the fluid without having to take the tailpipes off, so then it's not draining all over the exhaust pipe and all that stuff. So if I kind of keep them spaced a little bit, it'll drain down the center. These are going to be removable anyway pretty easily, but turned out okay. You can see I got a V-band clamp on the muffler here, so I can take it apart real easy, and then I'm just going to have a band clamp up here. But I will have to redo or modify my bracket here a little bit for my hanger. Where's my rubber hanger here? Oops. Let me see if I can get that on there. So that's how I had designed it basically, and then I was going to just run a hanger, weld a hanger to the muffler, and then come up on each side of it here. There's not really room to turn this the correct way it's supposed to, so I just turn it sideways. That should be plenty. But it came out to be right where my clamp here is, so it's going to be so close to that. I kind of, somehow I got to either move this forward or raise it up a little bit higher. I don't have a heck of a lot of room to raise it higher. So I'm still trying to debate what I want to do here. I think I might just space these bolts out that it mounts to, and kind of space it out forward, because this is angled a little bit. So if I just put a 1-inch spacer or something in here, it'll kind of go up and forward, and that'll be okay. And then I can get a little bit closer this way. And then this clamp, because I don't want this clamp necessarily hanging down. I got to turn that up somehow out of the way, because I don't want it hitting. Ground clearance is pretty small the way it is on this thing, or pretty tight. So I want to make sure I have these clamps up, where the bolt is not going to catch anything on the ground or going over a speed bump or something like that. So I'll have to adjust that a little bit, but that's pretty minor. I was kind of hoping that clamp was going to be forward or back of that, but ended up being right there. So we'll modify that, but everything looks okay. I ended up getting this stainless pipe from Ace Race Parts. I've been buying some stuff from them for a while, and they got very good quality parts and pretty reasonable prices, I think. And it's just, even the packaging, I was surprised at how they packaged this. It's basically shrink wrapped the whole pipe, then they put foam around it and everything, and man, it just comes out nice. And then I go and destroy it by welding this old pipe to it. But anyway, if you're looking for some good stuff, they got good quality parts. So, but
I feel nauseous, believe me. Never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to rise up just so they could see me. Did what I had to do just to feed me, and what was left over I put towards my dreaming. But the only thing in life that has meaning are the things you gotta work for, believe me. Take into your hands a plan, your own hands can land your own brand. And damn, I feel like no one takes accountability. They want the credibility, convincingly unwilling to put in the hours it takes to get some power. Don't be f***ing sour, take a cold shower. Scream until you're louder, work until you're prouder. And f*** all the doubters, they're just your downers. I swear to God they all let me down. I always fought just to wear the crown. I'm off at these fucking clowns who were all taught they deserve an ounce. It's only worth it if you work for it. It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. I won't stop till I wear the crown. I'm just telling you to fight for your dreams, but it's not what it seems. Man,
Yeah,
it's
buddy,
hard to be
getting excited now. This thing is basically wrapped up here, and it doesn't look too bad, if I don't say so myself. I got the exhaust tips there, pretty much identical from side to side, as symmetrical as I could. I thought it turned out pretty nice. You can see they're pretty level. They're not 100% equal, but they're pretty damn close. So, but went and wrapped them. So now all you see is just the chrome on the ends. But everything is wrapped up. Exhaust is all installed. Everything else, cables and whatnot. I do not have the sway bar hooked up yet. That'll be the last thing here, just because I need to adjust the ride height. So I don't have the links installed. That would be right there. Because if you have the sway bar hooked up, you're not going to get you're going to be kind of fighting yourself. So, well, both wheels are installed. They're not torqued yet, but I may have to take them off for some reason. But I think everything is looking good here. I'm going to get this thing on the ground, and I'm going to do it in a wheel alignment. Basically adjust the toe, and then double check the ride height there. All right, getting ready to do my alignment here on the back wheels. So this is my string setup, my string alignment setup. Pretty easy to kind of make your own. It's just some PVC pipe I have here with some string. I got a couple jack stands it's setting on, and then my kind of some heavy washers pulling that string tight. You can also kind of roll the pipe here too, or whatever, to put some tension on there. But basically what you're going to want to do is get your string as horizontally close to the center of the wheel as you can. Mine are just a little bit high, just because I don't have short enough jack stands up there. But basically you want to come and whoops, no, I bumped it. But you want to find a spot on the rim here, preferably dead center. That way, if you measure out here, this wheel could be turned this way or that way, so you're going to get some false measurements. So go to the center of the wheel. The dust cap here might or may not be in a goofy spot up from side to side, so just pay attention to that. But otherwise, go right to the rim itself, and then just measure out to the string. And then you want to make sure that it's the same measurement on this side as it is on the other side. Now, it doesn't have to be the same measurement front to back, because your track width from the front and the back could be different. So on the front axle, just make sure the string is even on both sides, and then come to the back, measure the same there, right in the center of the rim, like that, and make sure it's the same both sides there. I think I have like 3 1/8 back here, and that's 2 5/8 or something up there. So it's all squared, but just be aware you're going to be kind of fighting it, because once you get this centered on the front axle, then you come to the back and you might be off a little bit, so you got to move the strings left, side to side. Well, that's going to throw your front off side to side. So you're going to be kind of going back and forth, walking around the car 3 or 4 times to make sure everything is dead square. And then all you have to do is for the toe now, this will be for the toe measurement. Basically just measure back of the rim here, in front of the rim, and see what your measurements are. And then you'll be able to tell if the wheel is toed in, toed out. The spec on this from Ridetech is about 1/8 of an inch. They also give you a degree, like I think it's 0.25 degrees. So if you find a measurement in degrees, you might have to convert that somehow. Either that, or you have to have a degree wheel down here to be able to tell what that is. But so they say 1/8 of an inch total, no more than 1/8 of an inch. So you can kind of go a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch. And what that means is it's going to be total between both wheels, not just this one side. So when you measure it back here, you want the front of the wheel toed in towards the center of the car, basically a 1/16 of an inch on this side and a 1/16 of an inch on the other side. So that means both of them are toed in 1/8 of an inch total. So anywhere from roughly a 1/16 of an inch here, no more than that on each side, and you should be good to go. Mine are pretty close. I see I got a little bit of an adjustment to do. I think this one's toed in almost 1/4 of an inch, so I got to come out with that one some more. But I'm going to get that all straightened out. I got to do the camber, which will be, whether the top of the tire is pushed in or pushed out at the top. It's supposed to be about a degree. The specs from Ridetech are 0.75 degree cambered. I can't remember now if that's positive or negative. But the top of the tire would be in versus the outside of the tire, out. I think that's negative camber. Anyway, it's 0.75 for the street, they say, and 1.5 for more track-orientated cars. So depending on how much I want to set this up for street or track, I'll adjust that. Now that's adjusted by those washers on the cradle where the bolts go through the control arms. I believe it's the bottom control arms, lower control arms. So if that needs to be changed, I have to adjust those camber plates on the cradle, and that's a little more involved getting that all done. So the way they have it set up in the instructions anyway, to get that, they say it should be about a degree of camber. So we'll double check that. I'm just going to use an angle finder, digital angle finder, and basically going to go from the top of the rim to the bottom of the rim with either, I don't know, straight, what do you want to call it, piece of wood or straight edge. That's what I'm looking for. Put that on there, and then put my angle finder on there, and then I should be able to see what degree it's at. And if I have to adjust it, I have to adjust it. So hopefully that's set up right, and I don't have to mess with that. So, but once I get those two measurements kind of figured out, then I'm going to put it outside on the driveway. It's a little bit, I got a nice flat spot out there, because being where I got my drain in here, it's kind of dished a little bit in the back there. So I'll get it outside in the driveway, and then I'm going to measure my ride height just up to my, fender, the bottom of the fender lip there, and make sure that's even all the way around. It's pretty close right now, but right now I think the car might be angled a little bit just because of the pitch of the concrete here. So get all that done, get it outside, back in here, and it's pretty much ready to go then, at least for a test drive anyway. All right, guys, until I can get this thing back on the road and over to the alignment shop, I'm about as far as I can go there. So I think for now I'm just going to get the oil changed on the engine, get that thing ready to go for spring, and hopefully you enjoyed this video. Appreciate you watching. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later.